on the cusp of a movement, particularly grabbed my attention because of the connection to right-centric education. There are so many different models and pedagogies and theories of education, as you all know, from holistic education to self-directed education to experiential learning. We'll put a slide up in a minute. There's hundreds of pedagogies and theories and schools and models, and many of them, very, very wonderful in their own right. And yet, it's the paper presents an opportunity to come together in, I call it, one basket under one umbrella, whatever it is, regardless of our different philosophies and our unique contexts, globally. I think that we can all come together and unite as form a community of practice under the major premise of right-centric education, which is that, education should be centered on human rights for all participants, teachers, educators, students, everyone. So here we are, and we have right-centric education, and we now have also I suppose, a foundation to look at that through and a framework to say, okay, how can we move forward? How can we align our efforts, no matter what they are, big and small and different? And so the two loops model is actually a way of doing that. And I think I'll pass it over to Sasha because she was the one who actually introduced me to the two loops model, and she has an in-depth understanding of it. She's also a certified many, many, many things. She has many certifications, but she's certified in the art of holding space and also in permaculture. And so this, we'll ask her to explain it to us. If you haven't seen the video, I encourage you to watch it. But we'll ask Sasha just to say how you think, Sasha, it could fit with right-centric education and allow us to shift.
Yeah, for sure. I think just before I jump into that, I just want to do a bit of like framing the rest of our time together. So Liz and I are going to take some time to actually just like have a conversation and discuss, Richard's paper and the two loops model and just kind of our own experience, as Liz so generously summarized there around right-centric education in this basket it creates. And then later on, so we're going to do that for about like 10, 15 minutes. So just take what resonates with you. This is your opportunity to just kind of sit back and listen. And then after that, we're going to go through a series of breakout rooms where you're going to get to go and like talk to some people who are on the call, come back and share with everybody, because we want to really make this as interactive and participatory as as we can. So yes, I can share the two loops model. I'm assuming that it's big enough for everybody to see. And if it's not, just please give me some tech help. I just started learning how to use this morning. Um, because I've actually shifted away, interestingly, from facilitating online and more into in-person after COVID. So the two loops model. So this model was first presented to me from a gentleman called Chris Corrigan and his wife Caitlin, who live in Bowen Island in Vancouver, and they hosted what was called the Art of Hosting. And this model comes from one of my favorite thinkers is Margaret Wheatley. Just a thumbs up or like a show of hands, like is anybody familiar with Margaret Wheatley's work and the Berkana Institute and yeah, yeah, leadership in the new science and all of that sort of stuff. They were the first ones to introduce Margaret Wheatley and Deborah Friese's work of the two loops model. And it was interesting to me because I've always been interested in systems change. Like since I became a teacher, and even as a student, I became a teacher because I wanted to change the system. Because even as a, upper working class, lower middle class, white, cisgendered woman in rural Alberta, I struggled inside of the school system. And I thought, this can't be this. If I'm supposed to be somebody who would succeed inside of the system. So if it doesn't work for me, it obviously doesn't work for so many other people. So how can I become a teacher to change the system? And once I got inside of the system, I recognized how hard it is to actually change that when we're coming at it with a mechanical kind of viewpoint of the world. So the fact that like we can just like swap pieces of a system out and replace them with something else. So the two loops model is based on a living systems model, this understanding that everything comes in circles and in cycles, right? So as we have one, what we call the legacy system, which would be our conventional, public education system, is on that top arc. We also are creating at the same time a brand new system that is coming up to help us transition over into the other system. And in preparing for this conversation, Liz and I actually took the time to actually talk ourselves through like, well, where do we as educators think we are inside of the two loop model? And where do we think the system as a whole is inside of the two loop model? So, Liz, I'm going to pass it over to you to kind of pick up that thread.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. So one of the things that came up in our dialogue was a point that Sasha made about, we really can't talk about shifting education without talking about other things. There is such a disconnection from ourselves, from each other, and from the planet that no matter what we try, it's only going to be, scraping the surface. So yes, I can agree absolutely with that. But I'd like to read you something that I just came across yesterday or 2 days ago. Anybody here? Well, I know some people are familiar with the work of Zach Stein. Um, he is a futurist, a philosopher, a think tank contributor. If you're not familiar with his work, I encourage you to Google him, zachstein.org. But I came across this piece, Sasha, after we were talking, and it made me think of one other thing, but I want to just quickly read it to you. So, Zach is saying in the past, education was as much about context as it is about content. Modern educational systems focus almost entirely on content, the information that must be inserted into a child's mind to make them a functioning member of society. This approach misses the fundamental point of education, which for most of human history has been just as much about learning how to learn, how to bond, and how to get along with others as it is about information regarding the wider world. When education became primarily about content, one of the many effects was a reduction in the value of elders who previously spent time with children as sources of wisdom about life and living. Older generations provided a means of critical cognitive and social development, helping children become the kind of adults who could work together toward common goals, optimizing for group dynamics over individuals. In many parts of the world, this has been largely lost. At the same time, the allocation of money has replaced the allocation of time spent with our children. Much of this money is spent on salaries for people who do not love or care for our children in the same way that we do. The close bonds between generations that previously supported development and learning have largely been stripped from contemporary pedagogy. And
Mm.
finally, the story of our civilization tells itself about education, also necessarily denigrates other perfectly valid approaches to learning about the world that had to make way for the kinds of learning we need to sustain globalized economic growth. So, over tens of thousands of years, groups of humans built lives in relative balance with the natural world, passing knowledge down between generations that prioritized the transfer of skills and wisdom that kept their societies healthy and whole. This approach may not have resulted in smartphones and air travel, but it also didn't result in nuclear weapons and industrial pollution. For those promoting more innovation as the answer to the challenges of our present time, it must also be acknowledged that it is this innovation that caused the problems we face today. Um, that piece just spoke to me in terms of the why and the purpose of education, and even entering in the two loop model without having an understanding of what that purpose of education is and how we hold that collectively, I think we would continue on the vicious circle or the hamster wheel or whatever. I think the people in this room agree that it's not so much about content. And so we want you to think about, and we're going to go into breakout rooms and talk about this, but think about, why you were here. What is the purpose of education? Do you see building a community of practice using a two loops model as a way to advance the philosophy and mission that you feel is what drives you? Because it's what drives each of us, the little pieces that we do that are going to create the shift. Do you want to add anything, Sasha?
No, I think we'll just leave it there. I
Yeah.
don't.
We're really interested to see what everybody in the room has to say. Are there obstacles and challenges that are getting in the way that you think perhaps collectively we might be able to address? Whatever resonates with you. If you could just talk about that for about 10 minutes. Hopefully, well, there's some people that are more than one person. Um, on a link. Well, only one, I think. So we'll put two people first of all to start,
I was
Sasha, in a breakout room,
I was actually
or
thinking
three.
three. Yeah. Yeah. How's
Okay.
that? Okay. So we need seven. Oop, not 77 rooms. We need 7 rooms. Okay, we're gonna open them now. We're gonna go for about 12 minutes. There's an opportunity in there for you guys to get to know one another. And then I've also put in the chat just kind of the questions to spur your thinking. And then we'll come back and we'll have a bit of a group share. Okay. So opening the rooms
Yeah.
now.
So if one person,
Go ahead, Liz. What were you gonna say?
and if one person can kind of take responsibility, yeah, if one person could take responsibility for reporting back when we're in our big session, that would be great.
Awesome.
So I want to be slightly controversial and I want to be corrected.
Okay.
So this is the point that I was coming to at the end of it. So I've heard of Margaret Wheatley before, but
Mm-hmm.
I have a judgmental opinion about it. And I'm going to give it to you.
Give it to me.
And I want to be corrected if I'm wrong. So the the topic is talking. I think she talks about change because she wants not to make change, but she wants to write books about change, and that is an intentional problem with her, and that's why I don't like reading her work, and my teachers also don't really like her. And I might be wrong because I'm taking a lot of gaps and filling it between with some patchwork logic, but that's my stance for now.
You know what, Vishwav? I would say there is no wrong answers inside of this conversation. Everybody is invited to share their opinion and their thoughts and their ideas. And I actually agree with you. Oh, Liz and I were having this conversation just before that. It's actually really hard for me to talk about the two loops model because I also just don't want to talk anymore about anything. And the title of this talk is on the cusp of a movement. And I feel I've only been in education for about 20 years and I'm young and I feel like we've been talking about the same things for 20 years. Even inside of my master's program that I'm taking right now, we're talking about stuff that I have been talking about for at least 10 years. So we're like really slogging it. And yes, I think Margaret Wheatley also likes to talk about change, but doesn't actually do the work in the way that maybe we need the work done. Yeah. Does anybody else have an opinion or want to follow
Yeah,
up on that?
not to play mine is bigger than yours, but I would say what you just said only for 60 years. Um, and John Holt's How Children Fail was published in 1964, okay, which is 60 years ago. And what he was saying had been said. I mean, first of all, Socrates said, first we kill all the teachers.
Mm.
how far back do you want to go?
Mm,
It's always been there.
hmm
And
But
in the late 60s and early 70s, um, there was this sense that this time we're really going to make a change. It was the same thing that school people say when they introduce a new reform, whether it's new math or team teaching or block scheduling or whatever. This is really going to make a difference. This is going to be a whole new ballgame. And those of us, if I may say, on the left, make the same mistake. And we say, this time we're really going to change the system.
so I would agree with that too, Peter. And I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to read some of Zach Stein's work because he actually does talk and walk simultaneously, unlike, say, Margaret. And so a lot of people, well, just read Zach Stein's work and then maybe we can have another conversation because I think it's full of promise.
Well, I think that I haven't read them Zach Stein, but I have read some Margaret Wheatley and dozens and dozens of other people, as I'm sure everybody else has. And I think that the writers and the philosophers and the quote unquote thinkers, the implication is the rest of us are not thinkers, um, uh, have a place. That's important. And it's a way of communicating to a wide audience and to get people thinking about this and that. The John Taylor Gattos, and we all have our long book lists, and I think that that's an important role. I think an equally important role are all the people who are choosing within their own family to pull their kids out of school or not put them in the first place, and to allow them to um, craft their own educational path. I think that's a critical role, the individual actors. And I think another important role are the people who start centers, learning centers, um, with their own types of programs and philosophies, democratic schools and part-time learning centers, et cetera, et cetera. I myself have started 2 of those. Um, and I think that's an important part uh, of the process of the paradigm shift that we're talking about. And I think people like Derry Hannum, who are working to either directly or indirectly through writing um, to change things within the public school system, um, with his 20% idea, or teachers who close the door in their classroom and say, I know what the curriculum says we're supposed to do today, but I think it's going to be much more useful if we, blah, blah, blah. I think all of those are important components. But working towards the task, though, of changing the mindset, which is at the heart of all of this, which is what Riane Eisler talks about in terms of the difference between a dominator culture and a partnership culture. And this is all about establishing a partnership culture.
Yeah, not to interrupt you, Peter, but I just want to play off of that because you're right. It is about creating a partnership culture, and one of the things, even though I criticize Margaret Wheatley, what I appreciate about the thinkers, and we see this happening in the chat too, people are like, we need theory and praxis, and that's true. So my question would be around the 2 loops model, and I'll put this out, to the group to answer. I'm curious to hear your answers, is like, so if we know it's about theory and we know it's about praxis and we know that we have all these amazing people that are doing all this amazing work, how come we have, like, what's stopping us from coming up that other side? Because when Liz and I were first talking about the 2 loops model in terms of the education system, we haven't reached a system of influence yet. we haven't yet come up that other side. In my opinion, we're still down in that like networking and community of practice piece and stuff like that. We haven't been able to go up or to be able to create a bridge yet. That's at least where I think the system is inside of that loop. And that's a helpful thought experiment for me when I'm thinking about what role do I want to play inside of systems change? Where do I place myself in those two loops so that I know which part of the system I'm influencing, whether that's the legacy system coming down, right? Or am I in this system, coming up, knowing that that's also a 2D model and there's lots of like interconnectiveness between those two systems. They don't exist in isolation. So I'll put that question back out to the group. Like, what do you think? The title of this talk is like, we're on a cusp of a movement. So what's stopping us from coming up that other side?
I'd like to talk about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
To me, now I'm in the US, and so I'm speaking at least about US, although I know that much of what I'm saying is relevant to the rest of you guys too. But the system is too powerful. Right? I've been trying to change the school system for 55 years, Peter, almost as much as you. It doesn't work. The system has too many energies going in different directions. We adults cannot change it. I think the young people can. To me, the young people, like I'm in particular thinking about secondary level students, middle schoolers and high schoolers. They're the only group that has leverage, because without students, you don't have a school. You can have a school without principals. You can have a school without teachers. Kids can teach themselves, or community people can, whatever. But you can't have a school without students. And so what I'm hoping is to get enough students aware of the fact that they could leave their school if necessary without it hurting them. They could drop out, they could self-direct, they can take a high school equivalency exam if they want to get that when they get to be old enough for that. It will not hurt them to leave school. In fact, it will probably help them. So my thing is to try to get enough young people aware of that so that then they feel strong enough that they go up to their school officials, the adults, and say, look, we insist on having a voice. Every single one of us has a right to be listened to. We have a right to collaborate on curriculum, and every other thing. And we are letting you know that we want this to happen. Okay? Will you agree to make this happen? And we have certain ideas. One of my ideas is school improvement group, which would be open to every single person in the school, student or adult, and not just teachers, but secretaries, custodians, whoever, and parents. Every person who wants to make the school a better place is welcome in the school improvement group. And then all those voices work together on different projects, curriculum, different things. And the message I want to give to young people is that if your school won't do this, do one of two things. Either start an in-house school strike where you go to school, you go to the building, but you declare yourself an emancipated learner and you read the books that you want to read instead of what the teacher's telling you to read, unless you have a class that you like, and you go to that, of course, right? And the second, if that doesn't work, start leaving school, walk out of school. In the United States, economics runs everything. And if kids start leaving school in large enough numbers, the money that the state or the district receives for them stops. That'd mess everything up. That would force the adults to say, hey, we got no choice here. We got to listen to these kids. So that's where I am. And let me just say this one last thing. The reason I'm saying that, what I want more than anything is a happy world, a world where people are safe and happy, where nobody's getting killed. And and where humanity is not destroying the environment, not killing cats and dogs and trees and poisoning the waters and the soil. I want that kind of a world. And I think that if people knew what was actually going on, they could work on fixing things. So if the young people get a voice in the public school system, in the United States, 90% of kids are in public schools.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm so focused on the public schools. That's where 90% of the young people are. If we can change the curriculum, change the energy in a public school so that every single student is respected and listened to, that could work. That will work toward making a better world. And maybe humanity can save itself from self-destructing, which right now, that's
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you, Roger. And it ties to what Yana has said in the chat too, right? Your school improvement idea is tied to that like grassroots, organization, which is the purpose of the Right-Centric Education Pledge as well. So we have two more people with their hand up. We'll go to Andrew and then Derry, and then I'm going to hand it, and then Liz, if you want to go after Derry so that we can introduce the next kind of like piece of the conversation and breakout room. Sound good? All right, Andrew.
Thank you so much. I'll try and keep it brief. We're on the cusp of a movement. What's stopping us from coming over the brink? I think, as Roger said, there's a large point about awareness. Most people outside of these kinds of circles won't even know about all the types of education. I don't even know about all the different types of education there are, and it's raising awareness of them. I think that's a large point. I'm really interested in your point about young people being the driving force behind it. I take a holistic view of stakeholders, and I think, yeah, young people have in this instinctive learning instincts. They learn from their environment, they absorb information. They would need, I think, allies. They would need educators to stand with them because a school and the system is organic, as we say. It's made with all stakeholders. They all have to be warm to the idea. And I think everybody has to come together and work in the same direction. When you talk about school improvement groups, I've been running a project that does a very similar thing. We go into schools, we set up a co-production group that assembles whole school stakeholders to rally around a common goal. And people are happy to come along. They give their ideas. Quite often I find that it's within a framework of the current system. You don't get anything particularly revolutionary. It's much more things like, we have school uniform in this country. Oh, can we have a different type of uniform? But there was at one point that's come up that I'm interested in exploring around the gamification of learning. But one of the big problems I'm facing with that is time. Everybody having the time to commit to it, to come together, to do the work. There's problems around organisation. I work with a group of young people on doing some social action on self-directed education, and we were working alongside them, but they'd think about it one week and maybe not pick it up again for another few weeks, and it'd lose the momentum. They'd forget where they were. And it can just end up very haphazard. And then the other thing you need for a successful movement is unity. There's power in numbers. Not one young person can do it themselves. For it to have the impact, it's got to be quite a few. And young people are facing other social divisions and amongst themselves at the minute. Bullying is very prevalent. A lot of young people are lonely. They don't necessarily feel confident having any kind of conversation with their peers, let alone starting such a bold movement such as this. That's my answer to the question of what is the blockages that are stopping us from becoming a movement. I would go into what I think the solutions might be, but I'm mindful of time, mindful of the question. I'll park it there and let's hand over to Derry.
Thanks, Andrew. We're going to go into the second part of your question in the breakout rooms, which is like the action piece, because we can feel we can feel it in the room. This is a group of people that want to talk about action. So go ahead, Derry.
It's great to have Andrew here. Andrew's the only person in the UK involved in education who I've ever heard refer to Sudbury Valley.
Hmm.
Nobody's heard of it in the UK except Andrew and me, and both of us never stopped talking about it. And one of the wonderful things about what he's done in the city of Blackpool is to try and get school students organised beyond one class or one school. I've been trying to do the same in Portsmouth in the south of England, because speaking from a European context, not just a UK one, the most effective school systems in Europe are those that systematically listen to young people. The ones that I've worked with in particular have been in Norway and Denmark and Finland. They have very strong national school student organisations with representatives of young people in every school. They're partly government funded, but they're very careful not to become dependent on government funding because they see that control lying in that direction if you're not very careful. In the UK, we've got quite a few organisations that have youth panels, but a youth panel advising the adults is one thing. A genuine autonomous school students organisation that can take the kind of action that Roger's referred to. That's another matter. And again, in my experience, the countries with really well-organised school student organisations are the countries with the most benign school systems. And I think of places like Sudbury and Summerhill or Sands School in England. They're kind of pioneers of possibility, aren't they? And we assume when we think about the two loops model question, and I'd like to ask, do you see it as a kind of Hegelian Marxist idea where you have a, thesis, antithesis, synthesis as the next system unfolds? And do you assume that the next system that will emerge from the loop is necessarily better than the last one? And if you do, why? Because there are things happening in the UK now, and for heaven's sake, with Trump, I think, in the United States, it's not necessarily sensible to assume that the next spin of the loop is going to be a benign one. Just in my time of education, some of the new loops have been anything from benign. For example, we had a change of government in 2010 that started to introduce punitive behaviour management policies into schools, which are quite dreadful, which crank up the anxiety of young people and are contributing to the lack of well-being. A last comment. In England, we have the unhappiest school students in Europe, possibly in the world. And the system is one of the reasons that is driving that unhappiness. So here's my question. Can we assume that the next loop will be better than the last one? And if we can't assume that, how the hell do we make sure it is? Thanks, Liz and Sasha.
That is a great question, Derry.
I'm typing it in the chat because I think it is a really good question. Yeah.
Yeah. And I hate to say it again, I sound like a groupie, but Zach Stein actually addresses this very question. And it's far too much to go into here. Yeah, not so in that book, Terry, but if you go onto his website and you look at some of the other groups that he's affiliated with, the Consilience Project, and then there's another one, I forget the name of it right now, but I just read this paper last week and it was brilliant in terms of answering that question. We need to, think about how we define progress. We need to think about all kinds of things. But I've put the link to Zach Stein's work and some other things in the chat just because I see our clock is ticking here. Of course, time is always an issue. Okay, one sec, Visha, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do. And then if you guys decide you want to do something different, we can absolutely do that. But we had two more breakout rooms originally set up for today, and I think we're just going to go with one now. Sasha, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I don't know that we'll have time for two.
Yeah.
So we're going to go with one, and maybe you can combine the questions from 2 and 3 and put them in.
You're riding the same
There's
way.
some things happening in the chat. More links.
Yeah.
Huh?
I said you're riding the
Okay.
same wavelength. I already set us up.
Yeah.
So
Okay. All
on
right.
that
So
same thing, merging
Yes.
things together, what Zach Stein and Civilizational Research Institute, which is Daniel Schmattenberger, Zach Stein, all of these people coming together, these thinkers who are trying to edge it. There are two things that I have to say about them. One is they are trying to change the minds of the elites, the ones who have the most amount of power. That's their orientation. And the second is they are trying to recombine idealism and materialism in one synthesis. Or they're trying to hold them together because different people see the world from different lenses according to their conception of the world. And they are trying to hold both of them together as not as a paradox, but as a way of approaching things. That's the gist of them, and yeah.
yeah, I think a good point. But I think that is possible, Bisha.
It is. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah. It's not simple, but it's possible, and that's where the hope is. Thank you for that summary. So breakout sessions for another 10 minutes. Then we're going to come back and see if we can deconstruct some of that. And then we're going to give the last 5 minutes to Richard. So, Richard, you may want to think about what you just share in the last 5 minutes to take us home, because you didn't get to start us off. So we're letting you take us home. And if you have any other questions, comments that you want to share that we can sort of try to address in the last 10 minutes, if you could put them in the chat, that would be great. And Marcia's going to send you off now into random groups of 3, and hopefully it works for you. If it's not working for you, come back and we'll put you somewhere else.
Yeah. Groups.
You have the option.
Yes. Groups 3 and 4. 3 or 4. Thanks, everybody. See you soon. Have fun.
We would like to invite maybe a voice we haven't heard from, a couple of voices we haven't heard from yet, to just give us a summary of what happened in their breakout room. Would anybody like to volunteer to do that?
Hi, this is Manju Chaudhary from Northern Quebec in Canada. And what we had discussed that we need to continue our conversation, just too short, 10 minutes to discuss so important point. And Ray and Jana and I, we agree that we need to find out a way how to connect ourselves. So maybe this will be my request, because I have to go for lunch. My students are coming soon. I'm in classroom, in fact. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for that. We absolutely, if you want to put your name and email in the chat, or agree to let Richard distribute the emails that you signed up with, that would be amazing. And that's exactly what we were hoping, that we would find a way to continue the conversation so that we can get the difficult work done. So thank you for that. Monsieur, anybody else like to share what happened in their breakout session?
I put my email address in the chat. If anyone would like a free PDF of my book about trying to be a democratic teacher in a public school, I'll happily send it to them if you just email me.
Yeah, it's an excellent read. I highly recommend it. Very practical application for what we're talking about.
I'll give a little plug for Derry's book, because I found it really valuable. Each teacher individually can work towards being or becoming as much as possible a democratic teacher within the school system. And there's chapter 6, I think it is, of Derry's book, where you get a good feel of what it's like or how you can be a democratic teacher in a state school, just the relationships that you establish with the students. And so there are things that teachers can do immediately just inside their classrooms, close the door and be human with the teachers. Derry's book helps to create the vision of what that is.
Yeah, and when you do that, then it'll be like Gatto, or I think Gatto or Holt, I can't remember, experience, and then the media came wanting to capture what was going on, and then they're trying to fly under the radar a bit. So Derry has absolutely changed lives and teachers' spaces because of his contributions. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to something that came up in their breakout session that you'd want to share with the group?
I'll say that there seemed to be general agreement that the concept of right-centric education felt like an appropriate umbrella for us to all fit under.
Thank you for that, Peter. Is there anyone that thinks their work doesn't fit under the umbrella of right-centric education? And that's kind of what we're hoping to, one of the things we were hoping to achieve today. And then the other was, what are your needs? What are your wants? And what can you share with us? And that's how we were going to kind of wrap up. And because we promised Richard a few minutes, maybe if you could put that in the chat, like what could you contribute to this movement in terms of using the two loops model and right-centric education, or whatever you have to contribute to help push the movement forward. If you could share it in the chat, or if you have a question, or you're looking for a resource, or you have a need, share it in the chat, and then we will try to address it after our session today. Somebody will get back to you with something. And so, Sasha, do you have anything to add before we pass off to Richard?
The point of the rights thing, I have a contrarian view, but that comes from the Constitution of India. So we don't just have rights written down in our Constitution; we also have our duties written down. And
yeah, we actually talked about that. Maybe Richard can speak to it, because I was thinking rights and responsibilities might be a better way to capture what we're trying to say. And Richard had something to say about that. But Richard, we have now reached our time limit together. Did you want to say a few words to send us off?
So I have 10 seconds now. Is that right, Liz?
9, 8.
Yeah, you know how to control me. Well done. The conversation can go on forever here, and clarifying what the Rights-Centric Education Network is attempting to do. It's everybody preserves their autonomy. We just learn how to, as World System Solutions says, work in it's the conscious collaboration. How can we better do that so that we amplify our voice and put pressure in the right places? With the time that I've been assigned here, the 5 seconds left, if you look in the chat, I put in a number of links there. And I want to bring your attention to some events coming up. They are excellent events from my perspective. The one later today, I haven't heard somebody speak so well about the history of education as Chris Bagley will in that presentation later today. The link is there. You can check the time for it. Tomorrow, John Jones of the World System Solutions, he spoke this morning. And I was just so impressed with it. I don't know how he can have that much capacity. My brain works at about a tenth the capacity that he was demonstrating with his today. He's definitely worth listening to. And so that's tomorrow at noon EST time. And then tomorrow also Stephanie Suler is on the call here, and she's going to be part of that presentation of teachers that have struggled with the system, and just what teachers as change makers might be. So if at all possible, you can get out to those events. That would be great. What I'm stressing right now is that it's not so much trying to bring in new people. Let's show who we are. And so show up at this festival so that all the people from the Learning Planet Institute and from UNESCO who might be following this get to see that we're more than just a couple of people on the fringe. We're doing a lot of presentations at the festival. They're all along the same theme of pulling education into alignment with human rights, which is a term that Safan and Yana have really brought to the fore. And I think that needs to be our slogan, more or less, that if we can bring education to reflect the human rights as laid out in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, it's written, we have it, we just have to apply it, and we need the places like the Institute and UNESCO to help with actually getting that done now. So we're a big ally of theirs, and I'm inviting them to come and use us. We'll help them get human rights established if they'll let us, and make the school boards and other institutions change accordingly. The human rights, rights-centric education movement, from my point of view, is bigger than education. When you talk about a community of practice with a special something that binds it, that special something being human rights. And so anybody fighting for rights, and this includes the inherent rights of nature, they would be part of this community. And so the force that we can potentially mount on school boards would be phenomenal. Any human rights organization join with us to get education properly implemented so that we're developing a population with the capacity to deal with pressing world problems. Some of what I just said sounds old school. We're talking about learners having the opportunity to fully develop themselves within the context of their communities and come together to work together to solve these problems. So I'm still under my time, but I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Richard.
And Sasha and Liz, thank you very much for leading this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
This has been great. Thanks.
See you, Sylvia. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
It was really fun.
Thank you so much for coming. And thank you for adding your contrary views, because I love it when somebody says, actually, I disagree with this piece, because it always leads to such a rich conversation. So thank you for bringing your voice to the space today.
Yeah, I'll echo that, Vishva. Really good to have had you on this call, and then also you're on the earlier one today, and I liked your comments there as well.
Yeah.
I've put a lot of work, and I think this place is going to be very useful for me to escalate into action. The kind of action I'm speaking is that spins a web that just catches everything. Yeah, but I feel the energy right already.
Mm-hmm.
Roger, I appreciated your comments, and four of us here were on the ground floor of founding the Unschooling School Group, which developed that idea of the free learner, which was kind of what you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, you might want to look at that website, Roger. There might be some things on there that you could use.
What's that?
Unschooling
Unschooling
schools.
school website?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta go.
Do.
Thanks all.
Okay. Thanks, Liz.
See you, Liz. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Stephanie, looking forward to your session tomorrow. I hope we get a good turnout there. Anybody who's still here, if you can get people to come out and hear what's being said there, it's a teacher perspective on where we stand, and we really need teachers to be involved in the answer here, because they're the front line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because there's 4 people with very different backgrounds living in different places, and it'll be a neat conversation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I came into this space just a couple of days ago about education. I've been always re-educating myself, but there's this something called Ecoversities Alliance.
Yep.
And the essence of it all is coming up to the point where, have you done enough work to see things in ways that you never imagined they could be?
Mm.
Yeah.
To be open to other possibilities, rather than the ones you hold already.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's a huge group of people there, and that opens up space for grace somehow.
Can you
I
say
like
that?
the way you said you're re-educating yourself.
You said it's eco universities or ego?
Ecoversities Alliance.
Ecoversities Alliance.
ECO.
Yeah.
Eco.
That's
They-
really interesting.
They
Well,
run
actually-
an amazing online conference every year, 4 days long, that is full. Usually it's in April. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Stephanie, to cut you off.
No, I really appreciate what you said, Vishva, because it's like one of the things that I'm thinking about going into 2025 is I feel like I have so many different things on the go that like I've got this project and that project, and I want to be involved in that festival and this, and it's the idea, it's one thing in me that is reaching out to make change and to help, make this world a better place. But my head gets stuck on being in so many different places. So it's interesting there that you're saying, that idea of like, so I'm having a hard time putting words to it, but something in what you said is like, it gives you the grace to try a whole bunch of of things and trust that things will land and grow when they need to.
So the essential point being, what you're saying is right, but the essential point being that we want to be redundant by doing our actions. Doing them in a way that we become redundant. Our actions become redundant after a point, because they manifest something. That is the key. It is not just to show up and show up and show up. It is to show up so that our actions are not required to be in that form anymore. And then something else will rise up, because always something else will rise up. But for this, it's essential that we keep that in mind.
And we need to make ourselves redundant. I love that.